Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life, constantly trying to meet expectations that never seem to end? Do you ever feel trapped in a cycle where your worth is determined by how others see you, where success is measured by likes, approval, and the constant chase for validation? What if everything you've been told about success, happiness, and belonging is not the path to freedom, but the very chains that are holding you back? What if the idea that you need to be more, do more, or fit into a specific mold is actually the source of your inner turmoil? What if the world you're living in isn't the life you're meant to lead? Are you ready to break free from the fear of judgment and start living a life that's truly your own, without needing anyone else's approval? Imagine a life where you are no longer weighed down by other people's opinions, where your sense of worth is rooted in who you truly are, not in how others perceive you. What would that feel like? What would you do if you weren't afraid to just be yourself? In today's episode, we're going to dive into profound Buddhist teachings that can help you escape this endless cycle of seeking validation and open the door to true freedom. You won't want to miss this, because the answers you're searching for might just be hidden in plain sight, and they are far simpler than you think. 1. You don't need others' approval to be whole. In a world that thrives on validation, whether through social media likes, approval from bosses, or praise from friends, there's an undeniable pressure to seek external recognition. This desire for validation often stems from a belief that approval from others will fill the gaps inside us. But the reality, as Buddha teaches, is quite different. We are not dependent on the opinions of others to feel whole. True peace comes from within. The more we depend on external validation, the more we create a cycle of seeking and never truly feeling enough. This constant chase for approval can lead us to overlook our inner strength and true essence. Buddha's wisdom encourages us to stop looking outward and to turn inward, where we can find a wellspring of peace and wholeness. I used to spend countless hours trying to measure up to the expectations of others. I thought that if I were just more successful, more liked, or more admired, I would finally feel complete. I remember when I was working on a project I was extremely proud of. Yet I couldn't feel a sense of fulfillment because I was constantly looking for external validation. It wasn't until a period of deep reflection that I realized how much of my worth had been tied to other people's opinions. I understood that real peace came when I stopped seeking approval and started trusting myself. It was a difficult but liberating journey, one that brought me closer to my true self. Buddha's core teaching on peace is profound. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. This simple yet powerful statement challenges the modern obsession with external validation. The teachings of Buddhism encourage us to look inward and cultivate a sense of self that is not dependent on outside recognition. The pursuit of approval from others only distracts us from discovering our inherent worth. Buddha emphasized that real peace is an inner state, a feeling of completeness that doesn't need validation from others to exist. To truly begin to let go of seeking approval, try this practice. In moments of insecurity or doubt, stop and ask yourself, what do I truly think of myself right now? Am I content with my own presence? Cultivate self-compassion and challenge yourself to acknowledge your own strengths and weaknesses without judgment. Over time, you'll realize that seeking approval is no longer necessary, and you'll find peace simply in being who you are. 2. Learn to embrace solitude. It's where your true power lies. In today's hyper-connected world, we're often surrounded by distractions, constant noise, and endless stimulation. Social media, emails, phone calls, these bombard us with information at all hours of the day. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and lose touch with our own thoughts and feelings. But there's one thing that many of us avoid: solitude. The mere thought of being alone, away from the constant buzz of daily life, can be unsettling. Yet, Buddha teaches us that solitude is not something to fear. It's an essential part of self-discovery and spiritual growth. True power comes when we learn to be at peace with ourselves in moments of quiet. Solitude is not about isolation. It's about finding the space to reconnect with our authentic selves. In these still moments, we can hear our inner wisdom, cultivate mindfulness, and develop the resilience needed to face life's challenges. When I reflect on my journey toward embracing solitude, I recall a time when I was afraid of being alone. For years, I filled every spare moment with activity, surrounded myself with people, and used distractions to avoid confronting my thoughts. I thought being with others would bring me happiness, but I never felt truly fulfilled. Then one day, I decided to spend time in complete silence at a meditation retreat. At first, it felt like a punishment. The silence was deafening. But as the days passed, something shifted. I started to sit with myself, to observe my thoughts without judgment, and I realized how much I had been running away from myself. It was uncomfortable at first, but with time, I began to find comfort in solitude. I started listening to my inner voice, something I had ignored for far too long, and in that silence, I found a deep sense of peace and clarity. Solitude, I learned, is not about avoiding the world. It's about creating the space to truly connect with ourselves. Buddha often spoke about the importance of quieting the mind and finding inner peace through solitude. He encouraged his followers to meditate, not just for the sake of cultivating mindfulness, but also for the purpose of self-realization. Buddha understood that in the noise of the world, it's easy to get lost in the distractions of the external. He saw that when we spend time alone, we can cultivate the mental clarity needed to understand the nature of our thoughts, emotions, and desires. Buddhism teaches that when we are at peace with ourselves, we are no longer influenced by the chaos around us. We can face the storms of life without being overwhelmed. Solitude is not a punishment or a form of escape. It's an opportunity to develop a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. If you feel uncomfortable with the idea of solitude, start by carving out small pockets of quiet time in your day. Begin with 5 minutes in the morning or before bed, sitting in stillness and simply observing your thoughts. This practice of mindfulness will help you reconnect with your true self. Don't be afraid to sit in silence. Even if it feels unsettling at first, the more you embrace solitude, the more you will discover the strength that lies within you. Over time, you'll find that being alone no longer feels like a burden, but a gift. You'll begin to tap into a wellspring of wisdom, creativity, and peace that you never knew was there. 3. Stop chasing the illusion of perfection. We live in a society that constantly promotes perfection, whether it's in our appearance, career, relationships, or even our own sense of happiness. Everywhere we look, we're confronted with images of success, beauty, and flawlessness. Social media only amplifies this pressure, often showcasing only the best moments, while hiding the struggles and imperfections behind the scenes. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that perfection is achievable and that it's something we must strive for in order to be worthy of love and success. But this pursuit of perfection is an illusion, a never-ending race where the finish line keeps moving further away. Buddha taught us that everything is impermanent, our achievements, our mistakes, and even our sense of self. The more we chase after perfection, the further we drift from acceptance and peace. True fulfillment doesn't lie in achieving some ideal version of ourselves. It comes from accepting who we are, flaws and all, and embracing the imperfections that make us human. I remember the pressure I used to put on myself to be perfect. I had a very clear idea of what success should look like: a perfect job, perfect relationships, and of course, perfect image of myself. But the harder I tried to reach that ideal, the more exhausted and frustrated I became. It felt like every time I reached one goal, another one appeared. I was never quite enough. I thought if I could just be perfect, I would finally feel complete. But the opposite happened. I lost touch with the essence of who I really was. During a retreat, I had a powerful moment of realization. As I sat in silence, it became clear to me that my pursuit of perfection had caused me to miss out on the beauty of imperfection. I had been too focused on getting everything right that I forgot to appreciate the journey, the growth, and the lessons along the way. That was when I understood. The more I accepted my flaws, the more peaceful I became. Perfection, I realized, wasn't something to strive for, it was something to let go of. Buddha's teachings about the impermanence of life are profound. Everything, including our struggles and successes, is in a constant state of change. The Buddhist concept of dukkha, suffering, teaches that our attachment to ideas of perfection only causes us to suffer. When we cling to unrealistic standards, whether about ourselves or the world around us, we create unnecessary stress and dissatisfaction. Buddhism encourages us to cultivate equanimity, or mental calmness, by accepting things as they are. True peace is found when we stop striving for perfection and instead embrace life as it unfolds, with all its messiness and unpredictability. Buddha also taught the concept of right action, doing the best we can in any given moment without attachment to the outcome. When we let go of the need for perfection, we make room for authenticity, growth, and true contentment. Let go of the belief that you need to be perfect. Instead of striving for unattainable ideals, focus on doing your best in each moment. Take time to reflect on the areas of your life where you may be seeking perfection and ask yourself, what would happen if I let go of this need for perfection? How would my life feel if I embraced my flaws? Practice self-compassion by allowing yourself to make mistakes and learn from them. Accept that failure is a part of life, and it's through failure that we often learn the most. Try this small exercise. The next time you feel like you failed or didn't meet your own standards, stop for a moment and acknowledge that it's okay to be imperfect. Embrace it as part of the journey. By letting go of perfection, you'll find freedom in accepting yourself as you are, right here, right now. 4. Rejection is not your defeat, it's your redirection. One of the most painful experiences we can face in life is rejection. Whether it's being passed over for a job, a relationship falling apart, or failing to meet a personal goal, rejection can make us feel like we've failed, like we're not enough. It's easy to internalize rejection and view it as a personal defeat. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us a different perspective. Rejection is not an end. It is simply a redirection. Buddha's teachings remind us that life is filled with change and uncertainty, and sometimes rejection is the universe's way of guiding us to a path better suited for our growth. When we can let go of the attachment to our expectations and the outcomes we desire, we begin to see rejection not as a failure, but as an opportunity to move in a new direction. Rejection, in this light, becomes part of the unfolding of our personal journey, a stepping stone on the path to deeper self-awareness and wisdom. I faced many rejections in my life, both personal and professional, and each time it stung. I remember vividly when I didn't get accepted into a prestigious program that I had worked so hard for. I felt devastated and questioned my worth. But looking back, I see that this rejection led me to explore new avenues, ones I had never considered before. I ended up finding a completely different path that brought me much more fulfillment than I could have imagined. First, I couldn't see the bigger picture. I was so focused on what I had lost that I couldn't see the new possibilities in front of me. It wasn't until I accepted the rejection and let go of my attachment to the outcome that I was able to see the new doors that had opened. Rejection, in that case, was exactly what I needed to redirect my path toward something better suited for my growth. In Buddhism, the concept of attachment is central to understanding suffering. When we become attached to a particular outcome or desire, we create suffering for ourselves when that outcome doesn't materialize. Buddha taught that attachment to our expectations creates pain and dissatisfaction because we cannot control every aspect of our lives. Life is constantly in flux, and rejection is simply a part of that natural flow. The Four Noble Truths teach us that suffering is an inherent part of life. But it's not the suffering itself that defines us, it's how we respond to it. Instead of clinging to what was supposed to be, we can let go and embrace what is. Rejection can be a great teacher, helping us to detach from our need for control and to trust that life has its own rhythm and wisdom. Buddha's teachings on impermanence also remind us that nothing is fixed. Situations, people, and outcomes change. By embracing this impermanence, we can better navigate the ups and downs of life with grace and flexibility. The next time you face rejection, instead of seeing it as a setback, try reframing it as an opportunity. Ask yourself, what is? 5. The power of letting go. Letting go is one of the most profound and freeing practices in Buddhist philosophy. Yet it is also one of the most difficult. We often hold on to things, memories, grudges, desires, or even our own identities because we fear that without them, we will be incomplete. But Buddha teaches us that attachment is the root of suffering. The more we cling to things, the more we create tension and dissatisfaction in our lives. When we let go, we free ourselves from the weight of these attachments and open ourselves to a life of peace and freedom. Letting go is not about forgetting or abandoning the things we care about, but about releasing the grip they have on our hearts and minds. When we let go, we create space for new possibilities to enter, for our true selves to emerge, and for a deeper sense of inner peace to take root. There was a time in my life when I struggled immensely with letting go of past hurts. I had experienced betrayal in a friendship that left me feeling deeply wounded. For years, I carried the resentment, replaying the betrayal in my mind over and over, thinking that if I just held on to that pain, I could somehow make sense of it or get justice. But the more I held onto that anger, the more it ate away at me. It wasn't until I came across a Buddhist teaching on forgiveness and letting go that I started to understand how much my attachment to the past was keeping me trapped. Letting go wasn't easy, but when I finally did, I experienced an incredible sense of release. The weight I had been carrying for so long disappeared, and I felt lighter, more at peace. It didn't mean I forgot what had happened, but I stopped allowing it to control me. I learned that letting go was not about excusing someone else's actions, but about giving myself the gift of freedom and healing. Buddha's teachings on non-attachment are essential to understanding how to live a life of peace and freedom. One of his most famous teachings is that everything is impermanent anicca, and therefore, nothing lasts forever. When we cling to things, whether they're material possessions, relationships, or even our own ideas of who we should be, we are essentially trying to hold onto something that is bound to change. The 5 precepts in Buddhism encourage us to live with mindfulness and wisdom, free from attachment. The act of letting go is not passive. It's a conscious choice to release our hold on what no longer serves us. Buddha taught that by practicing detachment, we can cultivate a sense of equanimity, which allows us to remain balanced even in the face of life's challenges. This doesn't mean we stop caring, but rather, we care without becoming overly attached to the outcome. Letting go can be challenging, but it is an essential practice for peace and happiness. If you find yourself clinging to something, whether it's a relationship, a job, or a past mistake, take a moment to reflect on how this attachment is affecting your well-being. Ask yourself, is holding on to this causing me suffering? What would my life look like if I let go of this attachment? Start small. Practice letting go of minor things that you're holding on to, perhaps a material possession that no longer serves you or an old grudge that you've been nurturing. With each act of letting go, you'll notice how much lighter and freer you feel. As you continue to let go of attachments, you'll create more space in your heart and mind for new experiences, growth, and peace. Embrace the idea that everything is impermanent, and trust that by letting go, you are making room for greater clarity and happiness. 6. The illusion of control. In life, we often seek control over our environment, our relationships, our careers, and even our emotions. This desire for control is deeply ingrained in our nature, and society reinforces it by constantly telling us that success comes from mastering our surroundings. But the Buddha teaches us something profoundly different. Control is an illusion. Life is in constant flux, and trying to control it only creates suffering. The more we try to control, the more we set ourselves up for frustration because we are attempting to grasp onto something that is inherently uncontrollable. True peace comes from recognizing the limits of our control and learning to live harmoniously with the flow of life. Acceptance, rather than control, becomes the key to inner peace. When we let go of the need to control everything, we open ourselves to a more spontaneous, authentic life, where we flow with the changes rather than resist them. I remember a time when I tried to control every aspect of my career. I meticulously planned my path, believed I had to control every meeting, every project, and every outcome. I thought that by controlling my circumstances, I could guarantee success. But no matter how hard I tried, I found myself stressed, exhausted, and often facing setbacks that I couldn't have predicted. It wasn't until I encountered a Buddhist teaching on samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, that I began to understand the futility of control. The very nature of life is impermanent and ever-changing. I started to focus less on controlling outcomes and more on embracing the present moment, accepting whatever came my way. By practicing this acceptance, I found that the pressure to control things began to lift, and I became more open to unexpected opportunities. I learned that true power comes not from controlling everything around you, but from mastering your ability to adapt and let go. Buddha's teachings on impermanence, anicca, and non-self, anatta, highlight that nothing in life is fixed or permanent. We cannot control the ebb and flow of life circumstances, nor should we. The Buddha teaches that the desire for control arises from ignorance, the misunderstanding that we can control what is inherently uncontrollable. The desire for control is also tied to attachment, another root cause of suffering. When we let go of attachment to control, we allow ourselves to live with greater peace. Buddha's wisdom offers a path of acceptance, understanding that all things are temporary and that trying to control the uncontrollable only brings suffering. When we surrender the need for control, we find freedom in accepting life as it is, with all its unpredictability and change. To embrace the idea of letting go of control, start by noticing the areas in your life where you try to control outcomes. Are you trying to control your relationships, your job, or how others perceive you? Take a deep breath and acknowledge that control is not possible in these areas. The next time you feel the urge to micromanage or manipulate a situation, remind yourself that true peace comes from acceptance, not control. Practice mindfulness to help you become more present in the moment, focusing on what you can control: your reactions, your mindset, and your attitude. Embrace the flow of life, knowing that the more you let go of trying to control everything, the more you invite peace and harmony into your life. Life will unfold in its own way, and you will be at peace with whatever comes, trusting that everything is happening as it should. 7. Let go of the past to embrace the present. We all carry the weight of our past with us. Past mistakes, regrets, wounds, and missed opportunities. Often, we find ourselves trapped in the stories we tell about who we were, what we've done, and what we've lost. But Buddha's wisdom encourages us to recognize that the past is gone. Holding on to it is like clutching a stone that only weighs us down. The more we dwell on the past, the less we can be present to the beauty and possibilities of the here and now. Mindfulness is the antidote to this attachment. By practicing mindfulness, we free ourselves from the past and allow ourselves to experience life as it is, without the heavy lens of history clouding our perception. Letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting it. It means learning to stop letting it dictate your present reality. The more we release old wounds and outdated beliefs, the more space we create for healing, growth, and joy. I recall a time when I was deeply attached to the failures of my past. I had made mistakes in relationships, in my career, and in the choices I had made. These memories haunted me. I would replay them over and over in my mind, asking myself, what if I had done this differently? What if I had said that? My thoughts were consumed by regret. It wasn't until I learned about the concept of impermanence in Buddhism that I began to understand how much my attachment to the past was holding me back. I realized that the person I am today is not defined by those past mistakes. I started practicing mindfulness, gently letting go of those old thoughts each time they arose. Over time, I noticed how much lighter I felt, like I had shed a heavy burden. instead of living in the shadow of the past. I began to embrace the present moment with more clarity and peace. Buddha taught that attachment to the past, present, or future leads to suffering. We are encouraged to let go of clinging to the past, to be free from the emotional weight it carries. In the Dhammapada, Buddha says, "We are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think." Holding on to past regrets shapes our present reality by clouding our ability to be fully engaged in the moment. The teachings on impermanence, anicca, remind us that everything changes: our circumstances, our thoughts, and even our identity. Holding on to the past keeps us stuck in a fixed sense of self that is not aligned with the natural flow of life. By practicing letting go, viraga, we free ourselves from the grip of the past and can approach life with a fresh perspective. To begin letting go of the past, try practicing mindfulness every day. Start by simply observing your thoughts without judgment. Notice when you start to get caught up in past memories or regrets. Gently remind yourself that these are just thoughts. They are not you, and they do not define you. If you find yourself reliving a painful memory, acknowledge it with compassion, then release it. Another powerful practice is to write about your past experiences, both the painful and the joyful, and then symbolically let them go by burning the paper or burying it in the ground. This physical act can help reinforce your intention to release attachment to the past. Letting go of the past is a continuous practice, but over time, you'll find that you can live more freely in the present, unburdened by what's already gone. 8. Embrace change as a path to growth. Change is an inevitable part of life, yet many of us resist it. We hold on to the comfort of what we know, even when it no longer serves us. Whether it's a job change, a move to a new city, or the evolution of relationships, the fear of the unknown often paralyzes us. But in the teachings of Buddha, change is not something to fear. It is a natural part of the cycle of life. Change is what allows us to grow, to evolve, and to become who we are meant to be. The Buddha spoke of impermanence, anicca, a core principle of his philosophy that reminds us that everything in life is subject to change. Our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies, and our circumstances are all in a constant state of flux. Rather than resisting change, we are encouraged to flow with it, to welcome it as a necessary process for personal transformation. When we resist change, we also resist growth. Change may not always be comfortable, but it is through discomfort that we often find the greatest opportunities for transformation. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we can start asking, "What is this change teaching me?" Embracing change means accepting uncertainty and trusting that it will lead to something greater. I remember a time when my life was turned upside down. I had to leave a job I had loved for many years, and I felt devastated. It was one of those moments that felt like everything was falling apart. I kept asking myself, "Why is this happening to me?" I had it all figured out. But life has a way of showing us that we rarely have control over the bigger picture. Eventually, after a period of mourning, I began to see that this change was opening the door to new possibilities. I started a new project that aligned more closely with my passion and purpose, something I had been too scared to pursue before. Looking back, I realized that the change I resisted so strongly was the very catalyst for my growth. Had I stayed in my comfort zone, I would never have discovered this new path. Buddha's teachings on impermanence, anicca, emphasize that nothing is permanent, and everything is subject to change. This includes not only external circumstances but also our inner experiences. The Buddha encouraged us to embrace change with openness, understanding that our attachment to stability often causes suffering. He taught that resistance to change is a form of clinging, and that clinging leads to suffering. By accepting change, we can find peace amidst the uncertainty. Buddha's wisdom also teaches that every change is an opportunity for growth and a chance to live more authentically. Change, in this sense, is not something to fear, but something to honor as a natural and essential part of our journey. To embrace change in your own life, start by shifting your perspective. Instead of seeing change as something threatening or disruptive, Try to view it as a sign of growth and potential. When faced with a new challenge or unexpected change, ask yourself, what opportunity is this presenting me? How can I grow from this? A simple exercise is to create a change journal. Every time you face a change, write about it. Reflect on how you feel, what you're learning, and what new doors it may be opening. Over time, you'll notice a pattern. Your ability to embrace change will grow, and you'll begin to see it as a natural part of life rather than something to fear. Remember, life is constantly changing, and the more we accept that, the more at peace we will be. Instead of resisting the flow, we can learn to navigate it with grace, knowing that each shift brings us closer to the person we are meant to become. 9. Cultivate compassion for yourself and others. Compassion is often associated with kindness toward others, but it begins with ourselves. In Buddhist philosophy, compassion, karuna, is one of the most important virtues to develop. However, we often overlook self-compassion. Many of us are our own harshest critics, judging ourselves for our mistakes and imperfections. This negative self-talk can create deep internal suffering, preventing us from fully embracing the present moment. Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment and ignorance. One of the primary attachments we hold is to our own sense of perfection. We are conditioned to believe that we must always be good enough to deserve love, happiness, or peace. But true compassion comes from the realization that we, like everyone else, are imperfect and deserving of love just as we are. It's not about seeking perfection. It's about embracing our flaws and extending kindness to ourselves. This same compassion extends outward toward others, allowing us to see them as they truly are: human, imperfect, and struggling, just like us. When we practice self-compassion, we free ourselves from the judgment that clouds our perception. We stop measuring our worth against unrealistic standards. Only then can we extend the same compassion to others, offering understanding, kindness, and acceptance without judgment. True peace lies in recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings, knowing that we are all on the same journey of suffering and healing. There was a time when I was incredibly hard on myself. I remember feeling that no matter how much I achieved, I wasn't good enough. I would constantly criticize myself for every small mistake, thinking that self-punishment was the way to improve. One day, I sat with my feelings during meditation and realized how much I was carrying in terms of self-judgment. I was not allowing myself to experience peace because I was always striving for something that wasn't attainable: perfection. In that moment of reflection, I remembered the Buddhist teaching of self-compassion. I decided to treat myself the same way I would treat a dear friend, with kindness, forgiveness, and understanding. It was transformative. I began to give myself space to make mistakes and learn from them, rather than berating myself for every misstep. As I became kinder to myself, I noticed that my relationships with others also began to shift. The more I accepted myself, the more I was able to accept others, and the more genuine compassion I could offer. Buddha taught us that true compassion is an expansive feeling that includes both self-compassion and compassion for others. The four immeasurables in Buddhism: love, metta, compassion, karuna, joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha, are virtues to cultivate on the path to enlightenment. The practice of karuna, or compassion, is not about pity, but about recognizing the suffering in all beings and responding with loving kindness. Buddha emphasized that, in order to help others, we must first be at peace with ourselves. When we are at war with ourselves, it is difficult to show true compassion to others. Buddha taught that the practice of mindfulness can help us become more aware of the thoughts and emotions that arise in our minds, allowing us to understand and alleviate our own suffering first. When we are mindful of our own pain and suffering, we can extend the same awareness and care to others, creating a cycle of compassion that heals everyone involved. To cultivate self-compassion, start by being mindful of your inner dialogue. Pay attention to the way you speak to yourself. Are you being kind? Are you allowing room for mistakes? If you catch yourself being harsh or critical, pause and gently remind yourself that you are human, just like any other being. You are worthy of compassion. One simple practice is to begin each day with a self-compassion affirmation. Say to yourself, "I am enough as I am," or "I forgive myself for my imperfections." This simple act of self-kindness can shift your mindset, making it easier to extend compassion toward others. In your interactions with others, try to replace judgment with understanding. If someone makes a mistake or says something that bothers you, pause and consider their perspective. Are they struggling with their own internal battles? Just as we are all trying our best with the tools we have, so too is everyone else. By embracing this mindset, we create a more compassionate world, one action at a time. 10. Embrace the power of letting go. One of the most profound teachings of Buddhism is the concept of non-attachment, the art of letting go. It sounds counterintuitive, especially in a world that constantly encourages us to hold on to our desires, possessions, and ambitions. We are often taught that to succeed, we must be relentless in pursuing our goals, gathering wealth, or attaining status. But Buddha's teachings tell us otherwise. Clinging to anything, whether it's an object, an emotion, or a belief, only creates suffering. Buddha's doctrine of impermanence, anicca, teaches that everything in life is in a constant state of flux. Nothing lasts forever. People come and go. Seasons change. And even the toughest of circumstances eventually pass. However, our attachment to things, whether material or emotional, can keep us locked in a cycle of suffering. Letting go, on the other hand, brings freedom. It allows us to live with less anxiety and more openness to life's unpredictability. It is only when we let go of rigid expectations and attachments that we can truly experience life as it is, in its raw beauty and impermanence. The act of letting go doesn't mean giving up on life or losing ambition. It means releasing our need for things to be a certain way and trusting that whatever happens, we will be okay. Letting go is a path to inner peace. It's about learning to flow with the rhythm of life instead of resisting it. I recall a time in my life when I was deeply attached to a certain outcome. I was working on a project that I believed would define my career. Every day, I poured my heart and soul into it, convinced that success was the only path forward. But despite all my efforts, things didn't turn out as I expected. I felt lost, frustrated, and defeated. I couldn't understand why my hard work hadn't led to the success I had envisioned. It wasn't until I learned to practice letting go that I began to heal. I realized that my attachment to this particular outcome was creating unnecessary suffering. I had defined my worth by this project, and when it didn't succeed as planned, I felt like a failure. But as I let go of my rigid attachment to that specific outcome, I started to see other possibilities. I embraced the uncertainty and understood that success wasn't defined by a single event. It was about learning and growth. Letting go didn't mean I stopped striving. It meant I released the burden of expectation and made space for something new. That experience taught me that sometimes, when we stop clinging to our attachment to control the future, we make room for life to surprise us in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. The Buddha spoke often of surrendering the ego and releasing attachments. In his teachings, non-attachment does not mean detachment or indifference. It means cultivating the wisdom to recognize that nothing is permanent and that clinging to anything, whether it's an idea, a relationship, or material wealth, will only cause suffering. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha taught that the root of suffering is attachment, desire. When we desire something and become attached to the idea of obtaining it, we set ourselves up for disappointment because the object of our desire may never come to fruition. Or if it does, it will eventually fade. By letting go of attachments, we free ourselves from this cycle of longing and suffering. This does not mean we stop desiring or stop pursuing our goals. Instead, it means we approach life with a sense of equanimity, a peaceful acceptance of whatever comes our way, knowing that the true nature of existence is impermanent. Letting go isn't easy, but it is transformative. Start by identifying the areas in your life where you feel the most tension or frustration. What are you holding onto too tightly? Is it a specific outcome at work, a relationship, or perhaps a fear of failure? Notice how these attachments make you feel. Do they create anxiety, frustration, or sadness? The next step is to practice mindful awareness. When you feel the grip of attachment, pause and take a deep breath. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to let this go? What would happen if I stopped forcing this to be the way I think it should be? You can also practice letting go in small, everyday moments. For example, if you're stuck in traffic, instead of getting frustrated, remind yourself that the situation is beyond your control and there's no need to cling to the idea of a perfect, stress-free journey. If you're faced with a difficult decision, let go of the pressure to make the right choice and trust that whatever decision you make will teach you something valuable. Finally, keep in mind that letting go is a continuous practice. You may find yourself returning to old habits of clinging, and that's okay. Each time you notice it, gently bring yourself back to the present moment, reminding yourself that true peace. As we come to the end of today's episode, I want to leave you with one final, deeply transformative thought. True freedom is not found in external approval, in the chase for success, or in avoiding rejection. It is found in your ability to embrace your own truth, to release the fears that hold you back, and to live authentically without needing to mold yourself to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. So, I ask you one last question. What would your life look like if you stopped seeking validation from others and began living for yourself? Imagine the freedom of embracing solitude, accepting your imperfections, and allowing rejection to serve as a redirection rather than a setback. How would that change your relationships, your career, your peace of mind? These are the kinds of questions that have the power to shift your entire perspective and transform the way you experience life. The answers you seek may not come all at once, but they will unfold when you start to let go of the need for external approval and tap into the infinite potential that lies within you. If you found value in today's episode, I encourage you to subscribe to Universal Understanding and join me in the next video, where we'll explore how to conquer the fear of failure and embrace the path of true self-mastery. This is just the beginning of a journey that can change your life forever. Remember, true power, true freedom, it all comes from within. The path to liberation begins with you. So, take that first step today.